So price action is actually the simplest strategy that you can learn in order to make profit, right? Of course, there are a lot more strategies that are more simpler than price action, but keep in mind I said that you can make money with, right? Other strategies, yes, they are simpler, but it's very hard to become profitable using other strategies. And when I was beginning, as for me personally, I used to think price action was actually harder, but I've come to realize that price action is actually a lot simpler than most indicators, except I think moving averages are the only ones that can be simpler. But if you're using any indicator on the indicator window that actually works, for example, like the TDI, right? I know that it's a lot harder to understand than price action, right? Though, as for me, I started the wrong route. I started understanding the TDI before I started understanding price action. But right now, nowadays, I use price action all the time. Why? Because I've seen that it's actually a lot even more simpler to understand than the TDI. But if you want to learn the TDI and moving averages, I've got videos on those. You can check them out later. But as for now, if you're a beginner, you're in luck, because I'm going to be sharing with you all the price action, so like strategies, everything that you need to know about price action, so that in order to become at least a little bit profitable, a little bit knowledgeable. I wouldn't want to say profitable, because profitability comes down to your mentality, to your setup, to your mindset at a personal level, right? That's what determines profitability, right? So over here, what we're going to discuss in this video is, first of all, we're going to be talking about what support and resistance, right? And then we're going to be talking about trend lines, and then we actually have what those flags and what continuation patterns, right? They are just a part of what support, a part of what trend lines, right? And then we're going to be talking about a little bit about what candlesticks, and then maybe supply and demand, but I won't talk about supply and demand today, right? But those are the four that we're going to be talking about today, right? So if you're interested in those, then stay tuned, and I'm actually going to be sharing exactly how you can do this simply, right? In order to start making, in order to start having like more consistent results or consistent entries, right? So I actually shared a lot more about these topics in detail or in their own individual videos, but if you want to start, if you want to see if you'll be interested in this, stay tuned and watch this, so that before you go to those videos, right? So over here, we're going to be starting with what support and resistance, right? So first of all, what is a support, right? So a support is an area when the market reaches that area, it rejects going up, right? So over here, in this case, whenever we've got a pullback to the up, going to the upside, like this, these are all areas of what support. Like this over here, when the market was going down, right, it reached this certain area, right? Price failed to break past this area and it rejected going up, so this automatically becomes a support area, right? This also over here, the market was going down again, right, and it failed to break past this area, right, and the market pushed up, so it becomes a support area again. Over here, the same story continues. Over here, over there, right, it's just one and the same thing, right? Now that you understand this, right, the opposite is also true for a resistance, right? So over here, this is a resistance over here. Why? Because the market was going up, right, and when it reached this area, it failed to break past this area, right, but it rejected going down, right? And then this over here again, the market put back to this resistance area, as you can see, right, and failed again to go past this area, right? So that's why you use support and resistance for our entries, but I don't like this type of support and resistance, mainly why? Because it doesn't work all the time, right? I'm going to be showing you why in a minute, right? And I'm going to be showing you this how I use support and resistance in order to get my entries, right? So I think we get the basic idea, right? So if you are supporting something, you are lifting it up, right? And if you are resisting something, you are pushing it down. Just have that picture in mind if you want to name your area of interest, right? So over here, why don't I like to use these types of support and resistance, right? So let's say we're going down, right? We're going down over here, right? And then over here we're going down, right? This is a support area, right? But it's not always that we're going to have a W or an M in this case, right? That's respected, right? So the market can come back over here, show like so like consolidate, like it's want to respect that area, right? And when you enter for your buys, they hit your stop loss, right? So usually when you are still in an opposite trend, if you are still in a trend, these areas don't usually work unless maybe you are already in a downtrend over here, right? And you get some sort of like an aim, right? Then that's okay to use this, right? But usually they don't work. But what I like to use as for me is the zone flip, what I like to call the zone flip area, the flip zone. Yeah, some call it the flip zone, but I like to call it the zone flip, right? So over here, what we are saying is right over here. Oh, let me use this, right? We are going down, right? The market pulls up, right? So this area over here is now our support area over here, right? And then when over here, when the market continues going down again, right? It doesn't respect this area over here, it breaks this area, right? And we've got a pullback to this area again, right? So this was a support in this case, but it got broken, right? So a broken support now becomes now becomes a resistance, right? So this is the area. This is how I like to use support and resistance, using these zone flip areas, right? So in this case, we can see an example of a zone flip in this over here, right? So as you can see, went down, right? Put back up, right? We came back. This was a support area over here. We broke past that area, put back to that area, right? And over here we get our entries, and we continued going we continued going down, right? So that's how I like to use support and resistance, right? So as you can see, it works for quite a few examples, right? So in this case over here, we can mark this area over here, right? As you can see, this is the major point over here, this resistance over here, right? It gets broken over here because I don't want to consider this. Why? Because these are showing that they wanted to respect this, but as you can see, I told you that most of the times these aims usually don't work. It seems like it's gonna work, right? You enter for your sales, the market spikes against you, right? And you lose a lot of money. So that's why I don't really like to use this, but I'll rather go for the continuation type of support and resistance, right? So this is one strategy that you can utilize when you're using price action, right? So it's very, very sweet. And I got a few examples over here, right? Like this over here, we've got a zone flip tested over here, another zone flip over here, right? This one was so like a zone flip over here, but it's not really a zone flip. It's something like an order block, right? I'll share more of that later. That's it on support and resistance. Now let's talk about trend lines, right? So what is a trend line, right? So trend lines, they are just like support and resistance, but this time we're using diagonal support and resistance, right? So we're using when the support and resistance, we're just using horizontal levels, right? But now we're using diagonal support and resistance, right? And unlike support and resistance, this over here, we need a minimum of at least 2 points to connect in order to draw a trend line. You can't use 1 point like how we use support and resistance, right? So in this case, we could have marked this as a support area, but when you want to draw your trend lines, you can draw a trend line using one leg only, right? Why? Because is it going to be facing like this, like this, like this? You don't know, right? So you need at least 2 points in order to plot your trend lines, right? So over here again, the same concepts that we're using on trend line and support and resistance work on trend lines also, right? When a trend line is broken, right, pull back to that area, right? So this was a support over here, we connected them, right? And this one failed to respect this support, and we've got a breakout, right? And over here, when it tested this, it continued going down. Why? Because we had a breakout and a retest of that, right? But unlike support and resistance, trend lines also usually work when you are even in the same trend. Why? Because they are already showing the same trend, right? So we didn't get a pullback to that over here, but you can even use them as your support and resistance, right? In trend lines, the thing that I want to share most on is the flags, right? And the other patterns, right? So when you're going the market is trending, like let's take this for example, right? We're in a downtrend, right? We've got impulsive move, pull back, impulsive move, pull back, impulsive move, pull back, another move, right? So that's how the market moves, right? So what we want to learn over here is how the market behaves, right? So over here, when you've got a push to the downside, right, most of the times, take note, right? These are the perfect times to enter, the perfect setups to enter, right? When we've got what? An impulsive move to the downside or to the upside, whichever the case is, right? And we've got a pullback. That's so like slowing down in momentum, right? It's not just going what? Straight like this, bam, bam, right? We want it to have what? A consolidation manner like, right? This over here, this is the sweet spot. This is what we are going to be looking for, right? So over here, we draw out our trend lines, right? Mainly if you are in a downtrend, the most important trend line is the one on the bottom, right? Because we are going to be entering either on the breakout of this trend line or the retest after a breakout. So that's when we'll be getting our entries, right? So over here, we draw out our flags, right? So we can have a flag or a wedge, right? And after that, over there, right, wait for the market to break out, right? You can enter on the breakout or wait for a retest of that area, and it continues what? Going down, right? And the sweet spot of this over here again is sometimes you can have something like this, right? We've got what? A breakout, right? And over here, as you can see, we've got what? Let me change this color over here, right? We've got a zone flip over here. So the pullback might not come back to the what? To the trend line, but it might come back to the what? To the zone flip. So keep that in mind also when you're trading this, right? So how do you see your flags over here, right? So a flag, I don't want to define it exactly. Why? Because I've got a video in that if you want to learn more about flags. But what we just want to see is a consolidation, like this case over here. We've got an impulsive move, a pullback that's so like in a consolidating manner, right? And we've got also a zone flip in this case. It's actually a sweet spot. So we enter over here, right? And as you can see, we went into profit, right? So that's just how simply you can use what? Flags or wedges or continuation patterns, impulsive move, pull back in a consolidating manner, right? And then you enter your sales, you get your what? Your entries over here again. As you can see, impulsive move, flag over here, right? Breakout, right? This breakout didn't come back to the trend line, right? As you can see, but it so like tested this zone over here, so you could have entered the entries over there or on the breakout of the what? Of the trend line. So it's actually a strong strategy that you can use in order to what? To get your entries, right? So we've covered three parts in this. We've covered support and resistance, we've covered trend lines, we've covered so like the patterns that we see using what? When you're using trend lines. So what about the candlesticks? What do you have to look for in a candlestick? Right, so for candlesticks, I want you to analyze how the body and the wicks of the candlesticks look like. What do they look like? What do they represent? Right. So in this case over here, right, as you can see, the wicks are to the upside. So it shows that what? The market is refusing to continue going up, right? So when we are at a resistance over here, right, of course the market is going to favor going what? Down. Why? Because it's rejecting to continue what? Going up, right? Hence it's showing that we might have a change in what? A change in momentum, a change in sentiment. So if we are already at our confluence zone, we will be able to what? To get our entries over here, right? We've got what? Pull back to that area over here, right? And then what? Slow down in momentum, right? A wick to the upside and then engulfing down, candle down to the downside over here. So we would have had our entries, right? A trend line also over here, right? Breakout of that trend line, retest, engulfing candle, you continue going down, right? So price action, you just have to get it, you have to be able to analyze it, you have to be able to practice it, especially for the trend lines. The trend lines, you have to practice drawing them, you have to practice drawing them to perfection. Why? Because yeah, it's so like difficult to know which point you are supposed to mark, right? And for the trend lines, I also forgot to mention, sorry for this, right? Make sure that your candles, your trend line touches what? The outer, touches what? Touches the what? The extreme ends of what? The candles. Make sure that it accommodates the wicks, right? Whichever time frame you're drawing them on, right? Make sure it accommodates the wicks. I don't want your candlesticks to look, your trend lines to look like this, like cutting in the middle of the market like this, right? Unless maybe that's where you'll be able to touch most of the what? Of the key points. But usually, if it's just clear, make sure that you draw your candlestick smart. Why not be smart, right? So that's how you use our candlesticks, right? So yeah, I think that's it. And maybe a little bit about supply and demand, but okay, supply and demand. Okay, well, let me just share a little bit of supply and demand. So a supply, what do we call a supply zone? A supply zone or let's say just start by a demand zone. A demand zone is the last green candle before a break in market structure, right? So over here, as you can see, we've got this resistance over here, right? And before we broke this resistance, we marked this last red candle before the break in market structure. Mark this red candle before the break in market structure. That's what we mark, and the market pulls back to that area. We'll be looking for our entries, right? I'm not going to go much into depth about other blocks, right? But if you're interested in that, I've got a video on that also, right? So yeah, I think that's it. I think I've got an example. Where was that example? Over here, right? So over here we've got this structure over here. This over here, we've got a break in market structure over here, right? We have to mark the last green candle before that break in market structure. So we come back and we mark this over here, right? And as you can see, when the market put back to that area in here, right, we've got our candlestick confirmations, and then we continued going down, right? So that's it about supply and demand. It's so simple, right? So I won't go much into depth about supply and demand, but just know that it also works, right? It's so like our support and resistance. When the market fails to reach our resistance areas, that's when you'll be able to use supply and demand, right? So yeah, I think what else do you want to know about price action, so that I can share it in the next video, right? So if you've got anything that you want me to talk about, just comment in the comment section down below, and I'll be able to create that video for you, right? So you are the bridge between where you currently are and where you want to be. So do the hard work. Peace.